Did you see the ESPN story? I don't know why I keep saying, did you see? I know you saw the damn thing. Myles Garrett has once again been rated as the best pass rusher in football by his peers, by people in the NFL. And it kind of pinpoints something that we've talked about a lot. And I really think it's even more interesting now coming off the offseason that Myles had.
Yeah.
I really think, and maybe this is something that wears out in time. I really think when Myles is done playing, I think his national legacy narrative is going to be spotless. And I don't think that's going to be the way it is in Cleveland for a while.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that, like in the article, Myles, it says Garrett's hold on the number one ranking is firm. And I thought about that, and I'm like, yeah, no, it is pretty firm. And then you hear other people talk about Myles from a national perspective. I heard Coward the other day, and he's like, he's unquestionably the best defensive player in the sport. And then he cited some PFF stats. And it's like, well, all right, what are you going off of? Well, PFF for the last 3 years is Myles Garrett is the best defensive player in the sport. This is now 3 straight seasons in a row that he's been able to top that list. And it's like, I don't get the sense that Browns fans treat Myles as if he actually is the best defensive player in the sport now 3 years running and does have this firm grasp on being the number one defensive player in the sport.
So I think some of this, is the flawed analysis and flawed coverage from a national perspective where there just can't be nuance because no one cares about nuance unless you're from the town. The other part of it is they just don't follow Myles every day the way you and I have in the casual Browns fan. So something like the car accident in Medina or I know his front lawn with the tombstones. I know that made national news, but it was more of a ha-ha kind of thing. Even Myles' trade request, was that even mentioned once in the damn ESPN piece? It's as if the things that do ultimately decide whether you are truly beloved in town like a Joe Thomas or not, or whether you're just really respected, really admired, but maybe you're not, okay, you're great, but you're not over there. You're not in that class. It's as if the national side of things just doesn't encapsulate that. And it is why I do think Browns fans have a better read on Myles Garrett than the national media does.
No, but here's where I think the heavens have opened up for Myles Garrett in an interesting way. I feel like for a while, people thought that you could make an argument for TJ Watt over Myles Garrett. And as TJ Watt had won 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, I thought people were trending towards the idea that he'd win a third, and all of a sudden he'd be tied with JJ, and it would just be this big thing, right? And last year in the second half of the season, he fell off the face of the earth. Now he's demanding a bunch of money. He wants his own new contract. And TJ Watt isn't looked at as favorably as he was, let's say, a year and a half ago. Who else is in back of that? Max Crosby got paid a bunch of money, but he's not on Myles Garrett's tier.
Micah,
not on Myles Garrett's tier. Very good players. Like, they're all very good players, but they're not at the Myles Garrett tier. And I feel like he has been able to separate himself from the other pass rushers, and the consistency of Myles Garrett and the fact that year in, year out, he's always at the top. This is where he's getting a lot of come up in the national news. And I feel like we should here locally be responding accordingly.
I know that this is more of a commentary on how we feel about Myles, and maybe, just maybe, the fact we might be too hard on Myles. And that's something that even as a guy who raged against Myles after the shenanigans he pulled this offseason, I'm willing to admit maybe I'm too critical of Myles and maybe I hold him too accountable for other things going on. At the same point, I do see the flaw in Myles is better than everyone and it's 3 straight years and it's a huge margin, because I don't think the margins, this is where I do think sports media in general has ruined a lot of these conversations. I think at any given point, you can make a credible case that Micah Parsons is better than Myles Garrett, and you can make one that Max Crosby is better than Myles Garrett. It doesn't mean it's true, by the way, but a lot of this is subjective. The margin of error between Myles and another great edge rusher is not the margin of error between, let's say, Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL, and Matt Stafford, the 6th or 7th best quarterback. And so it's almost like we're using the transitive property here to take how we talk about quarterbacks to the next most important position, in edge rusher. And that I don't think is good when we start analyzing legacies long-term, because I don't think that's quite fair to the great number of great edge rushers, pass rushers we have in the NFL right now.
No, I look at it a little differently. I look at it more the idea that 5 years ago it was a different crop of defensive players that he was battling with, and you can throw Aaron Donald from a defensive tackle perspective. We're talking best defensive players. It was a different crop of players that he was going up against, and T.J. Watt was in that group, and now he's in this mix with this new group, and this new group has all sorts of different players. Max Crosby, Hendrickson, those type of guys, but they're not like, you notice the constant here. The constant is that Myles Garrett continues to be at the top of these lists, and he continues to be at the forefront of any sort of list, essentially, that you can put together with this stuff. It's a longevity thing more than it is anything else. It's consistency.
Where we lead this to is, are we taking Myles Garrett for granted? And as somebody who's been, I feel like I've been as critical of Myles over the last 7 or 8 months more than anyone, I can tell you definitively we are. And it's not all Myles' fault. Some of the fake leadership stuff that I think is fair to hold him accountable for, some of that, I like, that's fair. But like the lack of team success over the last 5 years, yeah, they're a 3-win team last year in spite of Myles. The 2023, they're an 8-win team or a 7-win team in spite of elite play by Myles. That to me should be more of a commentary on the Browns than it is Myles specifically. But I do think when it comes to our feelings, and I've even started to notice some of this in revisionist history with Joe, and how people frame Joe's career of like he was a left tackle on a bad team. It's like, you should shut up. Because Joe's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and it's hard to be that as a left tackle in the NFL. And it doesn't matter about the team's success. That dude did everything he could to win. Well, I think we should probably carry that same weight with Myles, even if there are valid reasons why we look at Myles and go, man, like, you're so great, but there's 10% missing that's really frustrating.
Well, okay, where's the playoff wins coming from the top 6 players on this list? Trey Hendrickson, Cincinnati, didn't have a playoff win last year. Nick Bosa, San Francisco, didn't have a playoff win last year. Max Crosby, Las Vegas, didn't have a playoff win last year. Michael Parsons in Dallas didn't have a playoff win last year. TJ Watt, Pittsburgh at number 2, didn't have a playoff win last year. And then Myles Garrett for the Browns.
Well, but Nick Bosa and Trey Hendrickson have played in Super Bowls in the last 4 years. Micah has been to the playoffs 2 years ago, although Myles was as well. I see what you're saying, but I do think, like, I think locally is where we're putting that. I know the perspective you're trying to put, which is like those guys don't get dogged. Like Micah doesn't get dogged in Dallas for Dallas's lack of playoff success.
No, Max Crosby definitely does. And they just look at Max Crosby. You ever been in the Las Vegas airport? All it is just trying to sell you a Max Crosby jersey. Like, all they do is rave about that guy.
The Crosby thing's pretty interesting, too, because Max has been pretty public about the things he was battling in college, and he's had some growing pains in the public eye in his time with the Raiders. I think Myles has been the best player on this franchise every single year over the last 6 or 7 years. And I think it's natural that fans would then turn around and be like, well, but this, well, but that, and then also link that to team performance. And you're right, by the way. You are right to say this probably doesn't happen. And by the way, this is not what we normally have done with players. Cleveland is pretty normally so ridiculously pro player that it's why we talk about brown and orange colored glasses and stuff like this. But compare like Joe's treatment to Myles' treatment, and I mean, it is night and day in terms of how people feel about one guy versus the other.
It's night and day, and I feel like it's because I think there's a little bit of LeBron in Myles Garrett, and I think a lot of the fans are like, well, we put up with it because LeBron got his title, and LeBron took us to finals every single year, and so there's almost an attached sense of if we're going to put up with your hijinks and everything else that comes with you, we also need to have the winning that accompanies that as well.
I think that's fair, and by the way, I think there's a perception, and I'm somebody who's spoken to that perception with his comments on leadership at the end of last season, with his reasoning for why he wanted to trade, and then the fact he folded on his trade demand before free agency in the name of money. The other thing that LeBron has is LeBron's been accused of not being entirely honest multiple points or being fake or insincere. That is another kind of LeBron angle of this. For that sure. Myles, and again, I think that's fair. I think if you look at Myles and think of him as a false leader, I think it's okay to be frustrated with that. I think it's okay for the double standard that Myles talks about wanting to be a great leader and then clearly lives by a double standard in that locker room. I think it's okay to point out that you can't be both. You can't be a truly great leader. You can't be a $40 million man. What Myles has said he wants to be, and also be the guy that's like, hey, but I'm not going to be here at this time when I probably should be here.
Yeah, it is interesting though. He has separated himself as number one with a bullet. Like it's not even up for debate right now versus TJ Watt. It really isn't. And for any of the other guys they want to throw in the mix, like it is Myles, and he's gotten to a spot where even in the past couple of years, you'd have all sorts of debates about who was actually the best pass rusher in the game. It's Myles right now.